All right, thank you, Dr. Blasi. First of all, I want to again welcome everybody on behalf of Merck. We appreciate you guys coming out and spending the day with us. I appreciate everything that Dr. Blasi does. We have the opportunity to interact with him on a pretty regular basis. Him and Bill, they do a great job. The students out here do a great job. So it's always great to come out and interact. Unlike Dr. Tonzer, we have to keep you awake. I don't know why we do this. We feed you, we turn the heat up to 94 degrees, and then we ask you guys to listen to us for 4 hours. So I don't know what's going to happen, but hopefully we'll be able to keep you guys awake here for a little bit. So today, what we're going to do, if you looked at your program, it said Dr. Leanne Walter is going to be here. Dr. Leanne's from Lubbock, Texas, and is pregnant, and her doctor said she was not coming to Manhattan, Kansas. So she, instead, we were able to get Dr. Nettleman, and I'll introduce him a little bit more here in just a little bit, to come up and talk about a study. It's actually a study that he did. It's a study that when he presented it the first time, I thought this is the place it needs to be discussed. Because when I was in practice, we worked in the Flint Hills grass system, okay? And this study kind of goes against the Flint Hills grass system, so I think it's going to be interesting and can create a lot of good discussion. I'm going to take the opportunity to talk to you guys about my second favorite topic in veterinary medicine, and that's worms. My first favorite topic is the immune system, but we all know the immune system can be extremely hard to measure, especially when we look at studies. We have a really neat study that I think demonstrates we do a great job of deworming, but I think we can do a better job, okay? I got one question for you before we start. How many of you guys buy cattle local? All right, how many people buy Southeast worms? They come up here packaged in nice cattle. Anybody do that? Anybody buy Southeast cattle? Southeast U.S. cattle? We're going to talk a little bit about that because one of the things that we have noticed, especially over the last couple years, we all know cattle move across the country. And with them, everything that goes with them moves. Diseases, worms, we're starting to see a lot of changes in our area. I want to focus a little bit on that as we go through. So we'll go ahead and get started. The reason we're going to talk about, we've picked two topics that we're going to talk about. These two topics are based on the number one and the number two things that as a pharmaceutical intervention that we can bring value back to the herd, okay? At the cow-calf level, this is a 2007 study done at Iowa State. At the cow-calf level, the number one thing is deworming. Appropriate deworming can return on those values at that time about $201. That's in weaning weight, that's in reproduction, all aspects of the cow-calf sector, okay? When we move into the stocker sector, it's still number one, all right? It's about 25%, but what's the difference in pharmaceuticals that we use at the stocker level that we don't use as much of at the cow-calf level? Antibiotics. Antibiotics is one of the biggest things that we use, and I think we all understand that, especially if we're buying higher risk cattle. But it's still 25%. And then when we go to the feedlot, the number one thing becomes implants, okay? Health is there, now the number one technology we can apply is implants. So what we're going to talk about today, we've got a study that we're going to review, that Dr. Nettleman will review, that was done at University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I'm going to focus a little bit on parasites, okay? And a lot of it will be review, but I want to go through the review because we're seeing some things, especially coming out of drought, that I think really highlights why we need to pay attention to some of the things that we're doing when it comes to parasite loads, okay? I hope everybody has seen this slide, okay? Because when we talk about parasites in cattle, the life cycle, it starts with adult parasites in cattle laying eggs, being excreted out into the environment through the feces, and then hatching into larvae, and then being re-ingested, okay? Which came first, we don't know, but we know that this is how the life cycle works, okay? This is where we're at. There's a couple key factors that we deal with when it comes to the parasites. Two things that we've always said we needed. One of them, moisture and green grass. Green grass first, then moisture. When is the most opportune time for transmission of parasites in Kansas? Spring of the month when we turn cattle out, right? So we always want to turn out clean cattle. Okay? When I say that we do a great job, we do a great job of cleaning out cattle, but can we keep those cattle clean to where we can see the production benefits? We need green grass and we need moisture. I can tell you, looking at fecal egg count results over the last 2 years, in drought areas, we've seen some of the highest parasite loads that we've seen in a long time. What are two things that we've been missing in the last 2 years? Green grass and moisture. We're still seeing transmission, and I want to focus a little bit on that. Almost everything that we do in this industry, we have tools that can help us, but we have management procedures that have to get us there, okay? So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we can do to help, but otherwise, things that we need to do to management-wise, okay? Worms, like a lot of other parasites, when we look at where do these things live, only 5 to 10% of that worm population is actually in cattle. The rest of it is out on pasture. As I travel around, one of the most common questions I get is, can we kill worms with fire? Okay? We can reduce the load with fire, but can we kill them off? Parasites want to survive. They've been doing it for a long time. We burn a lot of grass in this country. We turn clean cattle out. We bring cattle off grass that have worms. Okay? We can reduce it, but we're not going to completely get rid of it. 5 to 10% is in the cattle, the rest of it's out on the environment. So when we deworm cattle, we're taking care of about 10% of the population. We need to address the other 90, right? We've got to try to address the other 90. That's how we start to see production benefits when we think about deworming. The other thing that we think about, everybody's convinced that parasites compete for nutrition, and that's part of it. But the number one thing that parasites do is they reduce feed intake, okay? If we reduce feed intake, we're going to reduce average daily gain, we're going to increase cost of gain. All those things along production are going to change, right? And it doesn't take very many. As a veterinarian, one of the other things, especially in the stocker sector that parasites do, is they're great at changing the direction of an immune system. If we've got an intestinal tract full of worms, that immune system is really focused on worms, especially on a cell-mediated side. I'm not going to go deep into that at all, but it's focused on worms. When we bring cattle into a stocker backgrounding operation, what are the first things that we're doing? We're putting vaccines in, trying to stimulate protection against common disease processes we see. Those are all processes that originate inside the cell. When we have a lot of worms, we have shifted that immune system. We've shifted its attention. It's not a shutdown, but we've shifted the attention. Okay? So now we have an immune system that's really focused on the worms, and we may not see the type of response that we want to some of our vaccines strictly because we have an intestinal tract full of worms. When we talk about the appetite suppression, it doesn't take very many. Okay? When we get cattle in, we want them to eat and we want them to drink. 9 eggs per gram, and I will tell you, I've got an example I'll flip up here in a minute. That's not very many worms. 9 eggs per gram is a pretty low worm burden. A study back in 2000 showed that at 9 eggs per gram, we're going to see a decrease in intake in about 3.2%. Okay? We get up to 7.8%, 47 eggs per gram, we're going to see about 8%. I can tell you that the samples that we see, it's not uncommon to see upwards of 100 eggs per gram on cattle that come in off grass that haven't been managed with parasite control. Okay, so the cattle that we're wanting to eat, they have really have the inability to consume what we want them to, simply because they've got inflammation in the intestinal tract that just makes them not want to eat anything. So one of the things, I joined Merck 9 years ago, and one of the things that I'm extremely proud of with what they've done is this database. So how many of you guys have ever done fecal samples? A few of you. This is a procedure that we can do to help assess what level of infestation do we have in your herd, but also what do we need to do to try to change the dynamics of the infestation that you have in your herd, okay? The other thing that this has done, we have 3 classes of dewormers that are available to us in the United States, okay? Benzimidazole is the white wormers that we put in the gut. They go in, they starve that worm of glucose, and they die off really quick. We've got macrocyclic lactones that paralyzes them. It takes a little longer to kill the worms off. and that's going to come to them through the bloodstream. And then we got some imidazothiazoles, an injectable or a drench, but usually it's going to get to them through the bloodstream. Okay? But those are the three classes that we have. Shannon Kellner was here earlier, and he's the head of our livestock business. He hasn't told me of any new ones coming. Okay? So we've got to make sure that we can protect the ones we have. What this database has done is just simply been able to let us see what are the trends and how are these products performing for us. I have a hard time using the database to say that we're seeing resistance problems because it's simply a math. It's just nothing more than a math exercise. But what it does do is it tells us what type of efficacies are we seeing and maybe what are we seeing in the dynamics of the worm population that we're dealing with. Because it's pretty simple. We pull 20 samples out of a group of cattle, we test them, we apply a treatment of some type to them, and 14 days later we see where we're at. We pull another 20 samples. Doesn't have to be the same ones. Statistically, 20% of the cattle are going to shed about 80% of the worms. So if we pull 20 samples, if there's 40 head or if there's 500 head, we're going to have a good chance of finding that 20% or a population of that 20% that's shedding a lot of eggs. And it's going to give us a great opportunity to see where we're at. The other thing we want to do is we want to look at calves. We want to look at calves around 6 months of age. We want to look at calves that are coming in to stocker background or operations. Because as cows mature, they're going to develop some immunity. As they develop immunity, they start to reduce the amount of egg shed that we see. But also, you guys have all seen cow pies, a lot more fluid, a lot larger. There's a dilution factor. If we look at the calves, we can really get a good idea of what the population is in them. This has been going on for about 12 years, and we've got a lot of samples in here. And what we tend to see is efficacies just continue to drop a little bit. Okay? So this has really been a method for us to see what are the efficacies, what are the tendencies, and if we are seeing a drop, are there some resistance issues that we're concerned about. Okay? Greg Henderson had a really good article in Bovine Veterinarian. It quoted Dr. Kaplan on several things. One of the things that we hear discussion around is combination deworming, okay? And many of you guys, I hope your veterinarians have visited with you about it a little bit. All this is saying is we're going to attack worms from two different classes of dewormers, okay? If I can change an efficacy from 98.5 to 99.5, what I'm really doing is reducing the amount of eggs I'm leaving on a pasture that could have resistance. Okay? So there's some definite advantages to it. And one of the main approaches that they talk about is coming at them from the intestinal tract and coming at them from the bloodstream. So it's very common to see combinations of benzimidazoles like Safeguard along with the macrocyclic lactone. Those macrocyclic lactones, those are all the mectin type products, ivermectin, Dectamax, Cydectin, long range, all those types of products. We come at them from two different approaches. By doing this, we clean them out good, but we also reduce the chance of having some resistance start to develop. But the other thing that we know is 75% of the worms are in the bottom 2 inches of the grass. 90% are in the bottom 4 inches. Over the last 2 years in this area, where have our cattle been grazing? They've been grazing right down at the ground, okay? They're in that bottom 2 inches. We have seen a lot of elevation in the number of eggs that we see shed in these cattle. The other thing that we've seen is we've seen cattle that we clean out and we demonstrate through testing that we're able to clean out that actually start to shed eggs again in about 30 days. And we've put them into a dry lot situation. So there's a lot of things we're looking at there as far as what's the overall health of the abomasum of the intestinal tract, because if worms can't survive, they're going to inhibit. So we're starting to wonder if some inhibition may be taking place earlier, and we're looking at that as we start to see some changes going on within the abomasum as we look at it on histopath laboratories. Okay, this is an example of what a Fiekert would show us. We pull 20 samples and we just see how many eggs are out there. Okay, we talk about eggs per gram. This is eggs per 3 gram. So sometimes we have to explain that all we do is divide by 3 and then we get eggs per gram. So it makes it a little bit easier, okay? Don't have to do that with the nutritionist very often, but sometimes we have to do it with others to get it done. What we do here is, this is a demonstration. This is 60 days on grass. We turn cattle out, they're clean. 60 days later, we're starting to see eggs shed like this, okay? This is the scenario that we're dealing with, and I think this is extremely important, and the study that I'm going to show you here in just a minute really helps demonstrate this. When we turn cattle out on grass, if we turn them out clean, okay, they're going to turn them out onto a population, an environment that holds about 90% of that worm population. We're going to let them pick them up, and what you start to see is you start to see a decline in the environmental population because they pick up the larvae, but they're not shedding eggs yet, okay? So we have the opportunity to let them pick up the worm, the larvae, they become adults, but if we can do something prior to turning them out, or to those things starting to shed eggs, we can keep the reduction out on the environment. If we don't do anything, it's going to drop, and then they're going to start shedding eggs, and if we're in a cow-calf section, the calves are going to start shedding eggs, and all of a sudden we come right back to where we were, okay? So when we talk about deworming, there's several different approaches to do it, but the term strategic deworming just is nothing more than let's apply dewormer at the time that we get the best bang for our buck, essentially. So when is that? It's really sending animals out clean and then coming back before they can start shedding eggs. Life cycle's 28 days to 35 days. We're going to do it somewhere around day 30. Okay? So this is a study I want to go over real quick because I think it's a study that really helps emphasize not only what we can do with strategic deworming, but it helps show what happens on that pasture. This was done by Dr. Wade Nichols. He was the monitor. Dr. Nuttleman was the one that also helped with it. They went into Idaho, and what they were looking at is they said, we're going to combination deworm cattle. We're going to turn them out, and then we're going to do fecal egg counts on a very regular basis, and half the cattle we're going to strategically deworm, and the other half we're not. That's what this study showed. And what they were going to do was they were going to look at grazing performance, economics. We got to look at the economic side to justify the expenses and the time that we put in, and mainly pasture larva contamination. We'll talk about the parasite enumeration briefly, but I just want to focus mainly on the performance and the parasites. So what they did was they took 160 head, they broke them up into 20 pastures, 4 head per pastures, and we had 2 different sections, 2 different groups of them, okay? Half the cattle got dewormed and turned out, and then they got a safeguard, a 0.5% alfalfa pellet safeguard at day 28 and at day 56, okay? So we turn it out to them, we don't gather them up, we just feed it to them. And then the other group, they got dewormed and we turned them out. So that was how they went. 98 days of grazing and they brought those animals in, okay? When we look at fecal egg counts, this shows really what we tend to see with fecal egg counts as we go through and we focus on the environment. On day 1, they're all equal, okay? Everybody's got worms. We deworm them at day 14, they're still pretty well equal because we applied the same treatment to them. Everything got combination dewormed. Go out to day 28, we're starting to see some egg shed occur. They've picked up larvae, they're starting to shed some eggs. We apply the 0.5% feed to them with fenbendazole in it. At day 29, we come back 14 days later, you can see that the ones that didn't get treated continue to shed more eggs. The others we cleaned out, okay? So we clean them out and we're gonna do that through day 56. We're gonna hit them again at day 56. That's the philosophy behind behind strategic deworming. We apply that treatment at the time when we can start to see a reduction. So in those animals, what we're doing is we're keeping the parasite load down. One of the interesting things about fenbendazole safeguard, we feed it to them and it achieves a level in the worm that is either going to kill it or the worm can't metabolize it. So when we feed it to them, they're going to consume it. If they get enough, it's going to kill them. If not, that worm's still going to have fenbendazole. They get a little bit more, it will kill them, okay? It's very short-acting. The white wormers are extremely short-acting. Probably part of the reason they're still very, very effective. Safeguard's been around for 40 years and still running almost 99% effectiveness, okay? So they're very, very short-acting. So that in itself has helped the molecule. So when we feed it to them, it's an additive effect and it's really short-lived. So it's there, it does what it needs to do, and then it's gone. What about average daily gains? Okay, if we go down to about day 42, they're equal, up 0 to 42. Then we start to see separation. We start to see about an 11%, almost 12% difference between cattle that got strategically dewormed and those that didn't, okay? 1.6 versus 1.45. One of the things that I think is so important, and the last 2 years have shown us this, when we start talking about, if we talk about research or if you're looking at studies, I think percentages tell us a lot more than actual numbers. Because Dr. Nuttleman will visit a little bit about it, but we look at percentage change. What percent change can we attribute to a therapy that we apply, okay? Because I can say that something may give you 23 pounds gain if everything's right, but next year it's dry and we only get 14 pounds. But if we look at percentages, the percentage tends to stay pretty consistent, okay? So we saw about almost a 12% difference. What about in the total weight gain side of things, okay? Total weight gain, if we go down to the bottom, there was an 18-pound difference. Again, about a 12% difference, okay? So cattle that didn't have parasites in them were able to consume more. They were able to gain more in a very similar, in the same stocking density setting, okay? So when we start to think about what are some of the things that we can do, this is one thing that we can start to see changes and start to add pounds to these cattle. Because everything that we've talked about today, that Dr. Tonser talked about, it seemed like pounds was one of the driving forces. Pounds pays, and I think we all understand that, so we need to try to address that. One of the other things they do, we can look at eggs, and eggs give us an idea, but what really matters is how many worms are in the gut, okay? So I knew it'd be right after lunch, so I thought I'd put a good picture up here, and I'm trying to see everybody's got their heads up, nobody's down between their knees gasping for air, so I think we're okay. They clean out the worms and they count them, okay? Great grad student project, I would think. That'd be a great thing for them to do. What did they see, okay? What they see is exactly what we see with the egg sheds and exactly what we see with gains. Cattle that were treated, the numbers stay down, okay? So it really boils, it's not just that we're not shedding eggs, it's that we're reducing the number of worms that are in the gut, but we're also reducing, as we reduce those worms, we reduce inflammation and we reduce the negative impact that worms have on appetite, okay? Pasture larvae. This is the key driver, okay? 90% of our population's out here. So what happens in a strategic type of deworming in that case? If we go down to just look at the number of larvae that they found on the pasture as we look at after deworming, okay? Fenbendazole pellets would be the combination. You can see that those worm counts stay much less. We talk about strategic deworming not only in reducing what's going on in the cattle, but also trying to clean up the pasture, because that's really what we're doing. We're trying to reduce the pressure that those cattle are up against when it comes to that's out there on the grass. So when we look at the conclusions of this, if we add combination deworming up front, okay, and then apply a strategic deworming in this particular study, and we've seen it in multiple studies, we saw the benefit and in this case it was 18 pounds out over 98 days. Okay, these cattle came off grass weighing about 7, and I think with Dr. Tonser's that'd be about somewhere in the 278 range probably. 278 times 18, the math is pretty easy when we get right down to it. The other thing that it did is it reduces the parasite load on the pasture. That's really what we're after, especially when we get into some of these intensive graze situations where we're putting a lot of cattle in and we're moving them around. The more we concentrate cattle, the more we're going to increase the challenge they're up against, so anything that we can do there. So we reduce that. But one thing that it did do, we've always looked at it and we've said, in a strategic deworm for stocker, we're going to go about day 28 if we're going to do a strategic deworm. We're going to go 28, we're going to go 56. Down south, we may go another 28 days. But what this study showed was if we do a combination deworm up front, maybe we can stretch it out a little bit longer before we give that strategic deworm, stretch it out a little bit longer and still have the same effect, but maybe reduce it even a little bit more, because instead of 28, we go to day 35, and then we go to day 70, so it gives us an extra 2 weeks essentially where we can start to have reduced pasture contamination up to the time when we're going to pull those animals off grass, okay? So in conclusion on this study and the conclusion on my part here today, when we look at these strategic deworming, we saw that 18 pounds advantage. And in these types of cattle, this is very consistent with the studies that we'll see when we look at any approach where we're trying to apply a strategic deworm scenario. Decreased parasite burdens, decreased pasture larval contamination. That says today's market price. They had 242 in there on an 809 pound, 240 on an 827. There was about a $23 advantage. Okay, so there's not a lot of cost associated with it. $23 advantage over it, and those of you that have never used it, all you're doing is feeding them. You're feeding them, and you're just feeding them a product that contains fenbendazole. So with that, we'll have time for questions at the end, but I want to make sure that Dr. Nettleman has the opportunity to visit with you about his particular study. So at that time, I'll have him come up, Dr. Brandon Nettleman. He's from Amherst, Nebraska, and which is just north of Kearney a little ways. He graduated from UNL. He struggled a little bit with the purple, but I think it's starting to grow on him. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about the study that they did up there. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, Tim. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It sure is a pleasure to be here. Admittedly, I do have to say this is the first time I've been to the Stocker Day. I've tried to come down multiple times, but then just something came up and I felt like I needed to be taken away from coming down here to be a spectator. As Dr. Parks mentioned, that was my plan today, was to just come down here and be a spectator, and Dr. Leanne was going to be presenting these data to you. But under the advisement of her doctor, she decided not to travel. So I am happy to be here and happy to be able to stand up here and present some data to you. So I've been with Merck about 9 years now and been able to do a lot of research, and I would have to admit this is one of the most fun projects I've been part of, because there's a lot of different parts with it that I think as you guys are sitting out there, hopefully that I would argue there's probably at least something in here that can apply to your operation. It might not change anything you do, but it can apply to your operation. Okay, whether you're buying calves and getting them straightened out and then selling them, whether you're going to take them out the grass or retain ownership, whether you're pushing them, not pushing them, whether you're an all-natural program. There's things in here that can say, all right, am I getting paid enough premium not to use these technologies? Admittedly now, it's the most fun project I've worked on, but it's also one of the most difficult to present to an audience, especially right after lunch when it's getting warm out. There's a lot of numbers, okay? I'm gonna just warn you, I'm gonna try to just work through it and give you some ideas where if your operations manages things this way, you could look at these numbers versus these numbers, and so we'll try to get through there. But overall, what we tried to do is we tried to background calves during the winter. Do we gain them at 1 pound or do we gain them at 2 pounds during the winter? Okay, I know a lot of times we focus on, we really got to rough these cattle over the winter so we can turn them out to grass that next summer and get compensatory gain. I'm not in any way trying to say compensatory gain isn't real and isn't worth considering. Okay, that is not the point of today. However, can we still capture more pounds by putting more weight on during the winter, maybe get less gain on grass, but our system gain might be better? Then that all comes down to your operation. What are your feed costs? What's it going to cost you to add the weight gain? So there's 240 steers. We got them in during the winter. Again, we targeted 1 pound during the winter, 2 pounds or 2 pounds, okay? They were all fed grass hay. These cattle were fed 10 pounds of modified distiller's grains to target that 1 pound. These cattle were fed 30% modified distiller's grains. And that's how we achieved 2 pounds of gain. Within those 2 levels of gain, we gave half of the cattle Ralgro or no implant. And did that within both groups. This winter system, they were in pens so we could monitor intake and control or target gains, have better control over that. And then from there, that next summer, we turned out to brome pastures up there in the eastern part of Nebraska, okay? So what we figured is that if you're going to implant during the winter, you're probably not going to turn them out to pasture without some kind of a grass grazing implant, okay? So if they got a Ralgro during the winter, they got a Rev G going to grass that next summer. And then if they did not get an implant during the winter, half of them stayed non-implanted, the other half got a Rev G. So there's essentially 6 different groups of cattle that we're looking at here. And then after the grazing system for about 60 days, we tried to pull them off that mid-July time frame, where you might be targeting that barbecue sale if you're going to sell off grass. But then we put them in the feedlot and put a Revelar XS in them. We tried to market them at consistent back fat thickness, so we let days on feed in the feedlot fluctuate a little bit to allow us to market the same carcass composition. I'll just admit we didn't get that achieved very well. There's still some really good information in the feedlot portion, but some of the stuff's a little messy. For the sake of today, we're just going to talk primarily higher. Sorry guys, that better? I can hear myself just fine. So for this first part, going to the results, we're just going to go over this winter system right here, where we got a row grow or no row grow, gaining 1 pound to 2 pounds during the winter. So these graphs are going to look pretty similar for quite a way through here. So left-hand side, we have low winter gain. So the target was 1 pound to gain. Okay, the control cattle gained 1.2. So we were pretty close to getting our target gain. Oh no. The high gain cattle, we targeted 2, and we were 195, so again, pretty good. If we put that row grow in them, we got a 134 daily gain due to that row grow, or we got a 2.2. So if you look at body weights, or if you look at the percent improvement, that row grow gave us a 13% improvement. That goes back to what Dr. Parks was talking about as far as, so we always like to think pounds. What are we going to get from a pound standpoint? But in reality, it's a percent improvement. So when you look at it, the body weight differences, there was a 22-pound increase in body weight for those cattle that were gaining 1 pound during the winter. That row grow gave us 22 pounds. If they were gaining 2 pounds without the implant, that row grow gave us 39 pounds. Okay, so the pounds are different, but that percent improvement was still 13%. So based off of what your target gain is, determines how many pounds of product that implant's going to give you. So ultimately what we can look at, again, just our implants gave us a lot of pounds. So if we take both management factors, so we targeted a heavier, that slide shouldn't be there, I'm sorry. We'll come back to that. So now, okay, so you got 40 pounds if you're using a row grow with 2 pounds a day, or you got 20 pounds, okay? Implants work. Now, how does that affect subsequent performance when we go to grass? So that's what we'll look at next moving forward. So again, we have the cattle that were gaining 1 pound during the winter versus 2 pounds. And then within each set, we've got no row grow, no Rev G, no row grow or Rev G, and we have a row grow, Rev G. Same way over here. Nothing, 1 Rev G, row grow, Rev G. If we look at just the cattle that gained 1 pound with no implant versus the cattle that gained 2 pounds with no implant, is anybody surprised that these cattle had a lower average daily gain on pasture? Absolutely not, right? Greener cattle go to grass, they compensate. That's our compensatory gain factor right there. And that's kind of well, no joke, Brandon, we know that stuff. Absolutely. Okay, but when you look over here, does the Rev G still work if they got a row grow during the winter? Absolutely. We still got a good response with that Rev G, even though they had a row grow, compared to the cattle that got a Rev G only in both groups. Sorry, I should be going through all the statistics with you, I'm sorry, but yeah, if you doubt my p-values, I'll be glad to show them to you, but for the sake of not loading you up on numbers, we'll just kind of try to go through it if we can. So look at it from a body weight standpoint now. Okay, so we bought these calves in November, now we're pulling them off mid-July, and we had different management factors. So these cattle weighed 816 pounds if we had the low input during the winter with no technologies. So we gained, 30 pounds here based off of our 2 implant program during a row grow and a Rev G during the summer. So 30 pounds. Over here, 58 pounds just simply due to those implants. Again, that percent response is the same, but where these cattle were gaining more, we got 50 pounds. Now if you look at the differences between our low and our high, these cattle here that did not get an implant, they're still 75 pounds heavier simply due to the management that we did during the winter. So even though these cattle gained 30% less on grass, their off grass weight was still heavier. So they were still able to maintain some of that. So then the question comes back to, okay, well, what does it cost you to add that extra gain during the winter? For some of you, increasing your distiller's grains by 20% is going to be pretty cheap. For others, it's not. Again, so that's where the differences in your operations determine if you're going to be able to increase winter gains or not. But if we look at it from a low input during the winter with no implants versus high winter gain with implants, we created a 151 pound body weight difference going into the feedlot or going through the sale barn, however you're marketing your cattle after that. So if we look at these numbers here, again, that's just our winter diet gave us 88 pounds, 76 or 117. If we compare the high winter diet with 2 implants versus the low winter diet with 2 implants, so the implants or the diet gave us 117 pounds. Okay, again, your grass cost of gain is going to be influenced based off your winter cost of gain, but again, does the system make more sense to gain more during the winter? Sorry, I should have been more prepared with that. So I put some numbers to it. We always get challenged to put economics to it, and I don't like doing it because anytime I do it, you say, well, that's bullcrap, my feed costs are more than that, or whatever it is. So just based off the numbers that I'll give you, I'll just show you some differences. So when we break out the intake, and again, it was grass hay and modified distiller's grains, we just increased from 10% to 30%, so they averaged 1.8 pounds modified versus 6 pounds, and then that was the hay fluctuation. Okay, we fed these cattle ad lib. We just let them eat as much as they wanted to, and then maintained it there. So the overall, the low cattle gained 18 pounds of this diet, the high cattle gained 20. So if we put some costs with this, so I used these numbers a couple years ago. So I used a $200 per ton dry matter on my grass hay. Okay, at that point, I used 150 ton delivered, 10% shrink, $10 per ton to grind it. Came up with $200 a ton. Okay, my modified distiller's grains at that time was $150 a ton delivered as is, so $335 on a dry matter basis. So if you look at the low gaining cattle, again, they were 1.2 versus our high gaining cattle average 2.2. So our feed cost using these numbers here, this is just the feed portion. I don't think I put any yardage in this. You guys can use whatever yardage you want to. Again, there's a 2 pound intake difference, so depending on your head, how many trips you have to make. I mean, again, that's all up to your guys' operation. But so our total feed cost was about $1.92 per day. We increased the distiller's grains that went up to about $2.40. Okay, so obviously it costs more per day to feed a higher quality diet, but when you divide those $2.42 by a larger number, our feed cost of gain was 49 or 51 cents cheaper per pound of gain during that winter phase. Of course, when you look at it from a grass standpoint, the grass cost is going to be the same. I mean, I don't know what it costs down here in the Flint Hills for grass. I just use like an $85 a head cost for a 56-day period. So again, we look at the cattle that compensated 1.42 during the summer versus the cattle that gained 2 pounds during the winter, now gained 1.3 during the summer. Okay, our grass cost was about $1.52 per head. So then our grass cost of gain was obviously higher for those cattle that gain more during the winter. Again, that's what you guys understand compensatory gain really well. There's no doubt about that. So if you're looking at it, just how do I get my grass cost of gain the cheapest, then simply just starve them over the winter, right? But if you want to look at it from a system, then we go here where the complete 204 days that we own these cattle from the fall till off of grass, the total system gained 1.3 versus 2. Okay, and this is all just diet basics right now. So our total system cost of gain is 32 cents cheaper per pound by doing a high winter gain with implants, okay? So then again, overall, you just look at it to see what variable you're using to determine success. Again, just to look at it from an entire system body weight, our low input cattle over the winter with no implants gained 264 pounds. We increased the diet and technologies, they gained 409 pounds. So your total cost, or just everything summed together. So you can see there's obviously a higher feed cost. Today's industry or today's conditions, obviously 9% interest would factor into some of that as well. So I'm not just trying to say that there's all this money to be had, because your guys' costs are going to, your other costs besides feed are going to be influenced based off your operation, right? Your hauling cost, whatever it might be. I mean, something else I figured up, you know, if you're taking heavier cattle out to grass, and if you got a 55,000 pound load on a truck, for every 300 head you take out, you need one more truck. I mean, depending on your numbers, that can add up too. Those numbers weren't factored into this situation, okay? I'm just trying to, again, use the feed cost to give you some numbers to think about. So then if we talk about it from a compensatory gain standpoint, if we look back at these winter body weights, so the way we calculate compensatory gain is at the end of the winter period, there was a 32 pound body weight difference, 22 pound body weight difference. At the end of the summer phase, what's the body weight difference? Okay, I pointed at the wrong ones, I'm sorry. So 840 minus 728, okay, that gives us our 12 pound difference, 879 versus 750. So what is that difference? So, sorry, that doesn't show up at all. So this is the cattle that had no implants, okay? Versus cattle that had implants, 112 pounds body weight difference going to grass. When they came off grass, they were only 88 pounds different. So there was 24 pounds of compensation. So if you take 24 divided by 112, they compensated 20% of that gain back. Okay. These cattle here that didn't get any implant during the winter but got a Rev G going to grass, they were 99 pounds heavier going to grass because of that diet. When they came off of grass, they were only 76 pounds. So then they compensated 23 pounds. So again, that 23% compensation. If you go through the literature with compensatory gain, anywhere from a 15 to 40% compensation is pretty typical. So these two numbers right here are right in the middle of that, just like we'd expect across the industry. However, when you take the cattle that got a row girl and a Rev G and compared the high winter gain versus the low winter gain. So they were 128 pounds heavier at the end of the winter due to the diet, okay? Brought them off grass, they were 117 pounds heavier, so they only compensated 8%. So does that technology of these implants help protect against compensatory gain and help maintain some of that weight gain that we have by feeding a higher quality diet to get more of a winter gain? So based off these data here, if you're considering targeting a higher rate of gain, like 1 versus 2, we would encourage you to put implants in them. Otherwise, that compensation, you'll give a lot more of it back. If you implant these cattle, they're not going to compensate near as much, so you'll maintain that weight moving forward. Thinking about compensatory gain a little bit more, like with Dr. Parks talking about those cattle that came off that Idaho study were 18 pounds heavier due to the way we deworm them. Those cattle will then enter into the feedlot heavier because of that strategic deworming. They maintain that weight all the way through. So if we can increase body weight due to a technology such as implants, proper deworming, ionophores, they're heavier animals and they will not allow the lighter animals to compensate. That weight gain due to those technologies is maintained. If we have heavier animals due to diet manipulation, then the lighter animals will compensate. So I would encourage you to start thinking, just because I'm turning a lighter animal out there doesn't mean it's going to compensate. It depends on why is it a lighter body weight animal. Is it because of my diet manipulation? Then absolutely they're going to have a compensatory gain. If they're lighter because I didn't put a technology into them, they're not going to compensate the lack of technology. I just want to show you one slide, or two slides from the feed yard standpoint. Again, we had different days on feed, which kind of make the data a little messy. And in the end, we didn't get the body composition the same at harvest, so then it really gets messy. But when you look at it from a days on feed, comparing just the implant treatment, so essentially no implant, 1 Rev G versus a Row Girl Rev G. When the cattle came in, the Row Girl Rev G cattle came into the feed yard at 907 pounds, compared to the cattle that didn't get any implants, 864 pounds. So they came into the feedlot 43 pounds heavier due to those implants. Their final body weight was 49 pounds heavier at the end of the feeding period, the end of the finishing period. So just like I was talking about, they came in heavier to the feedlot due to the technology, and they maintained that weight all the way through. So there was no compensatory gain from the difference in body weight, again, due to technology. Now, if you look at it from the high versus the low cattle, those low gaining cattle still compensated some in the feedlot. But depending on if you're selling off grass or if you're retaining ownership, you can still maintain weight based off of what you did in November when you first purchased them, or whenever you're buying these cattle.